I guess we should go ahead without Kathy and we'll see if she joins us.
Well, did everybody read the minutes? And you have any questions about the October minutes? Okay, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes from October 6, 2021.
I will so move.
And all those in favor, I guess just show your hand up here. I know you got a little raised hand, but we got that, and ooh, are we the only?
Yeah, we don't actually have.
We don't.
Cheyenne.
Yeah, we don't have a quorum, so we'll have to hold off on approving the minutes until.
Okay, is there any new business? There isn't any new business on the agenda. Does anyone have new business? No? Okay. Tyler, did you have I guess we'll go ahead if you had a presentation. I don't know how you want to do that because we might have some people join later or.
Yeah, so I can either do the presentation as planned. I can send it out to those members who were unable to join us this evening so they have the same information. Or if the board would like, I can just plan on attending the December meeting in lieu of tonight. So there may be more people in attendance. I'm flexible.
I like the idea of presentation and send it out to the people who are not here.
And we are recording the meeting so people can watch it after if they want to.
Okay, great. Then give me just a moment and I will share my screen. All right, can everyone see this satisfactory? Yes. All right. So there were some questions that were brought up earlier this year regarding the indirect service costs that the city of Sandy charges the libraries. Mm-hmm. And so this presentation is geared towards sort of giving you some background on those costs, how they're determined, and what we plan on doing going forward to ensure it's equitable, not only for the library, both Sandy and Hoodland, but also for all the other departments of the city as well. And so essentially, the city charges these indirect service costs to all the direct service departments, those departments being anything that's, you know, facing to the public: building, planning, library, transit, Sandy Net, water, sewer, all those other utilities that we provide. And specifically geared towards the IGA that we have with Clackamas County, the funds that, you know, are collected for the library district are used to cover actual costs incurred. And so there's been some discussion about, well, what does that mean exactly? We can't track every hour that I spend doing something for Sarah and her staff. That's a timely, time-consuming commitment that really wouldn't be feasible for us to, you know, allocate dollar for dollar of what the library uses in services from the city of Sandy. The district funds can also not be used for debt service payments. So when the city of Sandy did the renovation to the library, we basically, you know, held ourselves accountable for making sure that we made those debt service payments on behalf of the library going forward. And currently we have a $339,000 allocation that's going from the city to the library district, or to the library department rather, for the current biennium, which started July 1st of this year and goes through June 30th of 2023. There were several budget cycles where the allocation of these indirect service costs were not updated. And so there was definitely a need in this current budget period to look at how these costs were being determined and make sure that we were updating those to be relevant with current FTE, current operating budgets, and just an overall sort of recalculation of those dollars. Ms. Drain specifically asked if it was possible to retroactively make any changes to what the library had been charged previously, and unfortunately it's not really feasible for us to do that for two reasons. The first being, going back to recalculate anything for closed budget periods creates sort of an audit and budget nightmare, both for us and for our auditors. And secondly, if there were any changes that were going to be made, it would have to be then allocated out among all the other departments and funds, which could, significantly impact other departments. And so the best course that we decided on was making changes for the current biennium and make improvements going forward in future bienniums to make sure that everything was allocated correctly. So a little bit of background on what exactly is being charged to the library. Indirect costs include administration, legal, finance, IT, and a very small percentage of some City Hall expenses. For the current biennium, the total charges for the library are $301,984. And that's down about $39,000, $40,000 from the prior biennium, which was $341,000. And that's a direct result of the updated methodology that we used in this new biennium. The administration, legal, finance, and IT calculation is based on a combination of FTE or full-time equivalent employees and the prior biennium's operating budget. So it's difficult to use the existing operating budget for two reasons. One, every time I tweak that number, then it changes the indirect cost for everyone else. And then I plug that number into other budgets and it tweaks everything, so we have to use a constant. And so we're using the prior biennium's numbers. And two, using actuals or close to actuals in those operating budgets in lieu of sort of our best guess in the current budget period. So trying to really tie exactly what did the library do over the last biennium, how many employees did the library have last biennium, and use that as our going forward measurement. And City Hall expenses is the other category that these indirect costs include, and that is a small portion of utilities, organizational fees, and memberships, et cetera. And so 50% of those costs are paid for by departments that are specifically housed within City Hall, so planning, building, economic development, and 50% is shared by all other departments and funds in the city. And so really what this also includes is the lease on our pool car, which the library historically, not so much now because of COVID, but there was a period of time where the pool car was used to travel to and from Sandy to Hoodland. And so instead of billing the library, directly for mileage or whatnot on that vehicle, it just pays a portion of the lease and the gas that is associated with that. So I already touched on this a little bit, but this is a more in-depth analysis. So the current charges for this biennium, $301,984. Of that, it's broken down into the 5 specific allocations: administration at just under $81,000, legal at just under $18,000, finance is the largest share here at $110,000, and that also includes all of payroll and HR services as well. IT about $72,000, and other, which is the City Hall sort of miscellaneous expenses at $21,000. The library also receives $339,000, as I previously mentioned, from the city general fund. And of that $339,000, about $95,000 of that goes directly towards the debt service on the library renovation loan. We budgeted $95,000 for this biennium. We just refinanced that to a lower interest rate. And so the actual cost this biennium will be just over $90,000. So there is a little bit of savings that the library will see over this 2-year period. And this is a just snapshot from our budget document. Hopefully you can see that okay on your screens, but essentially what this is each indirect service department. So you see admin, legal, finance, IT, non-departmental or City Hall up here at the top, and then each department or fund over here on the left that is paying into each of those other areas. And so you can see, hopefully you can see my cursor. I'm hovering over the library line now. If you can't, you can see all those total 301,000. All of the indirect costs for the city as a whole total just under 2.5 million, and that's split up, like I said, among all the other funds and departments. So moving forward, what are we going to do to make sure that the library is not charged an incorrect or unfair allocation? A couple things that we can take care of pretty easily in the current biennium, and then a couple things that we can look at going forward in future budget cycles. The first is increasing transparency as to what the city actually contributes to the library. So currently, there is one transfer from the general fund to the library of $339,000. What Sarah and I have talked about, and what I think we can probably do pretty easily going forward almost immediately, is separating that into 2 different transfers. One that's specifically to cover the debt service. You can show exactly, the going in and going out, so to speak. And then the other would be the difference of the total 339,000 in the debt service amount, which is really what's funding library operations. That debt service number in the current budget period is not relevant to the library's budget necessarily, because it's not district proceeds, and it's the city's expense technically. So we can clean that up pretty quickly. Going forward into the next budget period, we talked about possibly removing the library from the general fund and having a separate fund set up for that. The largest reason or the biggest driver for this is because the library does have restricted revenue. That district revenue that comes in is restricted for library operations. And so there's a decent argument to be made to have that separated out and housed elsewhere, so that it's not lumped into the general fund where, everything is sort of up to council discretion as how those funds are allocated. The library district revenue needs to be tracked separately, and so having it in a separate fund would probably be the easiest way to do that. And if we do separate it out into a different fund, we could create two departments within that fund, one for Sandy and one for Hoodland, so we could really track specifically what expenses are where. This came up during the most recent budget hearings with a couple council members who really wanted to see where that allocation of general revenue was going and how was it benefiting either the Sandy service area or the Hoodland service area. And so this would be a transparency issue, as well as sort of a benefit to show the county, when we finally get those task force meetings back up and running, to show exactly what the cost of Hoodland is and how perhaps the current methodology of dividing up that revenue from the Clackamas County or from the Clackamas County district is meeting or not meeting the needs in the different service areas. And then last but not least, continue to update the allocations based on the most recent biennial operating budget. So I have some new procedures in place to take care of a couple months before we start building the budget. And that includes looking at actual expenses, looking at actual FTE, and updating sort of those behind the scene numbers to make sure that we have good recent data for these allocations and not stale information that isn't relevant to the current period. And we want to make sure that the library, which is kind of the gem of our community, is the gem of our community. We want to make sure that it stays adequately funded, but we also want to make sure that everyone's paying their fair share, and that includes the library, but that also includes every other department. So that's one of my main goals going forward, is just ensuring that there's an equitable allocation of funds among all city departments, and that everyone pays their fair share to make sure that us indirect folk like myself still have adequate funding to do the job that we need to do, but not nickel and diming the library for every minor expense that can easily be absorbed somewhere else. And with that, I'll stop sharing. Hopefully you didn't hear any children screaming in the background during that. I heard a couple of those on my end, but I don't think it came through. Any questions from anyone at this point? Or Sarah, anything that I may have missed that you want me to add before I stop speaking?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that the police and the library are kind of have the most number of employees, and that's kind of a big driver for those indirect costs. Can you so are you tailoring indirect costs charged to each department based on FTEs, or is the formula different for each department, or how do you kind of come up with that?
Yeah, so for administration, finance, and IT, it's based on a combination of the FTE and operating budget. So it's an average of those two. So if the library has, I'm making up numbers for, an example purpose right now because they're nice and round in my head if I do that. If the library had, 10% of the city's total operating budget and 5% of the city's total FTE, then they would pay 7.5% of the indirect cost for finance, for example. So it's just purely an average of those two numbers. So by default, because of that, the police department's going to pay the most. They have the largest budget and the largest number of FTE. The library has a large budget thanks to the district revenue. They have a lot of employees, but not, their FTE number is high. It's around 13.3, I think, in the current biennium. But that's a far cry from the police department's 19. So, I won't sit here and say the allocation is perfect. Perfect would mean a lot more tracking and a lot more, monthly reporting of how many checks did we cut on behalf of the library or how many checks did we cut on behalf of the police department. But this is sort of the cleanest way to capture, where the larger amount of the expense is going. And so if you have more employees, you're going to have more of a need in the HR or payroll world. And if you have a higher operating budget, generally speaking, you're going to have more invoices that are being processed or, a higher volume of orders that are coming in or going out or whatnot. So does that answer your question, Kathleen? Okay.
So Tyler, I may have
Thanks.
missed it while I was marking off who was here, but did you explain how legal is different from those other areas?
No, I did not. Thank you for catching that. So one of the questions that did come up in past years has been, the library pays a lot of money for legal expenses, but uses very little legal services. And that was one of the concerns that Sarah's brought up in the past. And I think that Ms. Drain has mentioned that as well when we were previously talking about some of these allocations. And so as I mentioned before, the previous methodology was very outdated. So what I did for legal in this current budget is look at the actual legal services that were used by department over the last 18 months. So that accounts for, I'm trying to find my spreadsheet here really quick and not give you an incorrect number. I believe that half of our legal budget is paid for sort of equitably among all of the departments. The other half is paid for by the department that's actually using the legal services. Most recently, that's planning and building, with a lot of our development issues. So they're picking up a much larger share of those legal expenses. So the library still has some skin in the game because those legal services are available for them to use at any given time. And those services aren't capped at the amount they pay in. So if the library is paying $17,000 towards legal, but happens to have a lawsuit and spends $30,000 in legal services, we don't go back to the budget and take another $13,000 from somewhere else. It's sort of like an insurance policy. You paid your premium, you can use it as much as you need to this biennium. Next biennium, I'll do the same thing and look at the prior 18 months of usage and recalibrate that. I suspect that the library probably won't see a big change in those allocations on the legal side because they don't use a lot of legal services. I would expect more or less the other departments that use it quite often, that will fluctuate. Some years it's going to be building and planning. Some years it might be police if there's an incident that requires legal support there. So it'll probably fluctuate pretty significantly with other departments based on their usage, but the library historically has been pretty constant in not using a lot of legal services. And the one benefit to, using some sort of allocation like that is exactly what I mentioned, that the library is not going to pay $30,000 all of a sudden if they do have a legal issue. And so while I understand, the IGA wants to allocate specific, uses with those funds, the downside to that is if someone trips over a parking block in the parking lot, like has happened before, if we don't have some sort of quote unquote insurance policy set up for the library to use those legal services, they're going to encounter an unexpected hit that could really devastate their budget, in any given year. And we want to avoid that as much as possible. Any other questions or comments?
Other than the legal, and Kathleen's not here to ask the questions, but I'm just curious, what were any other hits or charges or something or funds that were a question or a concern? Can you answer? Can you address that?
Yeah. So I think legal was, and Sarah, you might have a better list, but what I recall was the legal issue that we just talked about, the trying to find the best way. I know Ms. Drain acknowledged that tracking every invoice, as far as accounts payable, chargebacks, or anything like that goes, would be an administrative burden and not a good use of staff time. But ensuring that there was a good, well thought out reasoning for how we're getting to the number that we're getting to. And so I think we have been able to clean that up as well. Sarah, do you remember if there was another specific area that was questioned?
I think those were the main points that Kathleen Drain was making. But do you want to talk a little bit about how you updated the insurance as well?
Absolutely. So again, outdated formulas. And so what I've done for insurance going forward is what I think is pretty reasonable, and it's based on square footage of buildings. So our property insurance is now just divided out equally based on square footage. So the library pays a very small percentage of the total property insurance bill because it has a pretty small footprint compared to, the combination of square footage at City Hall, the police department, the community center, the transit and operations center, the Sandy Community Campus buildings that we obviously have to have insurance on. And so that's, I think, the most reasonable allocation of property insurance. Our liability insurance is split 50% that the city just pays for immediately out of non-departmental. So, the city eats half that cost. The other half is allocated out with the same methodology based on square footage. I had to find some number that seemed reasonable. And I figured, liability is going to happen in those buildings. A larger building might have more exposure to injuries. And so we just used that same allocation there. Auto insurance is billed directly based on how many vehicles you have. The library doesn't have any vehicles, so they're not picking up any portion of the auto insurance anymore. I do believe that was included in the prior calculation because we just looked at total insurance bill, not insurance by service or by type. And so we've cleaned all of that up. And so there has been some cost savings for the library as well in that regard. I think if I had to guess, I don't have this number in front of me, but I think the 40 or so thousand that the library is saving this biennium with the updated methodology is really stemming from insurance costs and from the legal expense. The other, areas are, I don't want to say flat, but the methodology using the FTE and operating budget didn't make a drastic change. It did change it some, but it wasn't, some alarmingly large number. I think if I would have seen a huge increase or decrease with that updated methodology, we might have, done a little bit of a more deep dive into prior bienniums and to see where that shift really happened. Was it last year? Was it 6 years ago? Kind of how that worked out. But given that it wasn't an alarmingly large number on the operating and FTE side, and it was just that insurance and legal services side, we felt pretty comfortable going forward with the changes that were made. And if you get really bored in a year and a half, you're more than welcome to come to a budget meeting or 3 and sit through all of those, and we can really dive into it.
Yeah, I did listen to the last budget meeting. Yeah.
You picked the good one to listen to. That's the fun one. The first 2 can get a little tiresome after a while.
Yeah. Is there any more question? No? Let's see. I guess no more questions. Oh, Dale is here. Dale Huff, Friends of the Library. Okay. You're going to send your presentations to each member of the library board or to Sarah?
I will forward it to Sarah and let her send it out to make sure that we have all the right email addresses on there. I don't want to miss anyone on my end. So yeah, I'll get that sent to you later this evening, Sarah, and you can forward that out.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tyler.
Thank you for your time tonight. I have a couple of sick kiddos, so I'm going to excuse myself from the rest of the meeting, and I will see you again soon, hopefully.
Yes. Thank you.
Tyler. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tyler.
We have
Thanks.
somebody cute in your background, Jerry.
Oh, yeah. This is Xavier. He should be in bed. I'm in North Carolina, so it's yeah, it's 9:30 out here. Yeah. Okay, where are we? Staff updates. I'm at that wrong place. Strategic plan, this is the. Okay, the library district advisory committee, that's Kathleen.
Yeah, it is. We did hold a meeting at the end of October. I should probably let her describe it. Our next meeting is going to be in January. Ultimately, we looked at the annual reports. Kathy suggested forwarding a few things to the county commissioners that she saw were problematic. And the group ultimately decided to wait until, because the two annual reports were old, right? They were 17-18 and 18-19. So the group decided to wait to get the 19-20 and the 20-21 reports before we make any recommendations, or before the group makes any recommendations to the county commissioners, to see if there have been any changes in those areas that Kathleen Drain was concerned about. So.
Okay. Is there any questions from anybody else? No? Okay, staff updates?
So I just put the tree lighting in there. I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware. The library is again spearheading the effort for the tree lighting event, which is going to happen on December 3rd. So it is once again going to be a drive-through and live stream event mostly. Although you can walk through the drive-through area if you want to attend in person without a vehicle. So it should be lots of fun. Last year we had, I think, more than 200 people drive through. So hopefully we get the same kind of attendance this year. And there's a Girl Scout troop that's helping to hand out the craft for a cause packets. They contacted us, and Todos Juntos is also going to be volunteering at the event. They're a great local organization. Yeah, so it should be lots of fun, and mark it on your calendar. You can watch it on YouTube or Facebook, or you can come and drive through and see the tree all lit up and the whole thing.
So all the organizations in the city, or a lot of organizations, are involved in it in the city?
So the community center and the transit department, the public works department gets the tree set up for us. So a lot of departments within the city are involved in this event. So it's a great joint effort for the city.
Okay. Is there anything else for the good?
I think that's it.
That's it.
I'll mention that we had a city council meeting Monday night about the update on the pool and community center. And so I would encourage you all to watch that. It's the workshop part of the meeting. There was an update from the pool committee to Casey and Megan, who are on the pool committee. And then after that, the city council subcommittee, which is myself, Carl Exner, and Don Hokanson, presented to the rest of the council members an overview of kind of where we're at with the community center. And the big thing that we're waiting on for moving, there were some kind of conceptual drawings shown about where that could be, and using the middle school annex building that was there before, using that and building onto it. Excuse me, I just ate. And then also, but what we're really kind of waiting for on getting into more details about that is Rochelle Anderholm Parsh is the new Parks and Recreation Director. So she starts November 8th. And I'm expecting this community center project to kind of be the big thing on her plate. And I would expect that Sarah and Rochelle will be meeting, with a bunch of us to kind of start taking that with, fleshing out kind of what the needs and the wants are for the community center with the aspects of library programs and things like that. So that was kind of a neat, we're making progress on that front. So it's exciting.
That's great.
Thank you. Okay, and we need to, whoops.
Jerry, can I interject? I just wanted to double check. I didn't get a chance to watch the city council meeting yet, Kathleen. Did you happen to mention the library board's decision about extending the strategic plan, or should I do a formal staff report for city council, do you think, for the next meeting?
I think I brought that up in not Monday night's meeting, but the meeting before that.
Okay.
I believe. We can check on that. And if
Okay.
not, and then it's always felt on your, you do great monthly reports. But I think as I recall, I brought that up at the previous.
Okay. Perfect.
Thanks for the reminder.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll have to approve the October minutes at the January meeting and
The December meeting, it would probably be.
December. Sorry. Hope I'm there in December. Are we going to do Zoom again in December?
I'm guessing, yes. I think
Yeah.
so. I'm sorry, my partner got hit by a car and had knee surgery, and so has been on crutches. So it's difficult for me to be away in the evenings. And these last couple of weeks are the only weeks I've been fully at the library. Before that, I was going in for a few hours here and there and working mostly from home, just because it was very difficult. So thank you very much for the Zoom meetings. I really appreciate it. And hopefully by Christmas time, he will be walking and mobile. So I'm thinking January, we can start doing the hybrid meetings at City Hall again.
Hey, I appreciate the Zoom meetings. I'm in North Carolina. I can still stay in contact. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, then we'll see you in December.
Sounds great.
Okay. Oh, Dale, do you have a question? Is his hand up? Is he?
His hand is up.
Yeah, I can see that. But I don't, does he know his hand is up?
Sarah, who has the controls?
I do, and he is a panelist, so he should be able to talk if he
Unmutes himself?
he's not muted currently.
Oh,
Can he type his question in the chat box maybe, or?
I'm not sure he is aware of that. I don't know. Well, sorry, Dale. I think we will be adjourned. Okay. Well, have a nice Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll see you on Friday, but
Yeah, I hope so.
I hope so too. Schedules, yeah. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.